Why not try something smart to chew on? The Lunchroom on RCI, Monday to Friday, 12:45 to 2 p.m. The Lunchroom, informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI, food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It's Monday, the 27th of January, 2025. This is program number 1312 of the Lunchroom, and I'm your host, Calix George Jr. Now, of course, in addition to radio, 101.1 FM, you can also get us at our website, rcistlucia.com, and you can stream us live on Facebook. And you just have to search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. Please be sure to like and share that link as well with your friends and family. Now, of course, if you want to call in, the number to do so is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. And you can reach us via WhatsApp as well if you so choose. And that number is 724-0008. You can call in, you can message in on WhatsApp. And again, that number, 724-0008. Now, some birthday greetings for today going out to Mr. Irvin Ace Lochter. Happy birthday to you and wishing you an absolutely fantastic birthday. And also to Mr. Preke Joseph. Happy birthday to you, Preke. And we do hope that you're having a splendid birthday celebration. I look back in time and some history which happened on this day, the 27th of January. We go back to the year 1825. When then United States President James Monroe urged Congress to approve the creation of Indian Territory west of the Mississippi River for the relocation of Eastern Indian tribes to promote their welfare and happiness. In the year 1924, Vladimir Lenin was placed in a mausoleum in the Red Square in Moscow. 1944 on this day, January 27th, the siege of Leningrad was lifted by the Soviets after 880 days and over 2 million Russians killed in that battle. And 1945 on this day, in fact, the 80th anniversary is on as Soviet troops liberated Auschwitz and Birkenau concentration camps outside of Krakow, Poland, and now commemorated as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And in 1973, on this day, the Paris Peace Accord signed by U.S. Secretary of State William Rogers, as well as the foreign ministers of North Vietnam and the Republic of South Vietnam, and the Republic of Vietnam itself. They ended America's longest war and military draft. We now move on to our dish of the day. The daily dish is brought to you with the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. There's all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Box, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bossage Grocery Lanes, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
Welcome back to our program, and of course, thank you for joining us for a brand new week. And of course, it is never a dull day in terms of what is continuing to pan out in respect of the new Trump presidency. But before we even, of course, get to that, it is the 80th anniversary of the what is known as the liberation of Auschwitz. And that name has become synonymous with terror and the Holocaust, in which somewhere between 6 and 11 million Jews, European Jews, were killed in an effort by the Hitler-led Nazi regime to annihilate, eradicate an entire race. This, of course, had been panning out over a number of years, and it was not the first time, certainly, that Europe had witnessed significant persecution of individuals of Jewish ethnicity. And in fact, the DNA, the genetic evidence, in fact, suggests that this was a practice that, in fact, was almost accomplished many years before. And that's because of the what has been effectively traced as a sort of a very narrow point in which all Ashkenazi Jews today can in fact trace themselves to a very small population of Jews. And and the belief there, of course, is that in fact there was a major genocide of Jews in the past. And we've seen over the years, of course, continued issues of persecution, of course, deportation of people of of Jewish descent. Many Sephardic Jews, for example, Jews from the Iberian Peninsula, were effectively deported from Spain and Portugal. Many, in fact, came to the Caribbean as a result of that and settled in many parts of the Caribbean, including that of Barbados, but as well even the French islands, Martinique, as well as in Jamaica. And they made and Tobago as well, and they made certainly major contributions in fact, the eventual development of the sugar industry in those early days and other areas of the economy back in those days. And of course, so this issue of anti-Semitism is certainly a very old story and a very unfortunate stain on the history of the Jewish people and, of course, their time in Europe. Coming out of many of these efforts, in the wake of many of these efforts, we saw, of course, the desire of the creation of a Jewish state. It gave new rise to the pressing nature of creating a Jewish homeland and that entire Zionist movement, which of course eventually led to Mr. Ben-Gurion being successful in fact, declaring an independent state of Israel in Palestine. So, of course, that is something we just want to make note of course, and Auschwitz near the town of Ostvahem. It certainly became one of the places best recognized for this massacre of concentration camps, the deportation of many Jews in Germany. And of course, quite recently, we also marked the anniversary of the Wannsee Conference, that meeting, which effectively determined the final solution, as it was called, to, in fact, deport and kill millions and millions of Jews. And The first approach being pointed out was that they had hoped to be able to shoot them. And of course, it was very, very much almost an impossibility. And of course, began having major psychological impacts on the soldiers who were being asked to undertake these types of killings. And so eventually, the creation of these gas chambers to effectively kill hundreds of people at a time was the next phase in this entire matter. And of course, it eventually came to an end. The Red Army being able to eventually get into Poland and later on, of course, into many other camps. There were many camps. In primarily, yes, a lot of them in Poland, but also in Germany. And Bergen-Belsen comes to mind outside of Hanover. There as well. In fact, when the British eventually got to that camp, it was primarily soldiers of the Red Army, but also very many Jews as well were sent there in the later days of the war. And the conditions there were so bad that they had but no choice to simply, once liberated, literally burn the entire site down. And so, in many of these sites right now, what you end up having are cemeteries, grave markers, indicating where the mass graves of thousands of people at a time were eventually buried. So, a very sordid time, and certainly one that should not be forgotten, especially in this current era where we're seeing the rise of nationalism, the lots of conversations about immigration and illegal immigration and quote unquote who belongs and who does not belong in certain countries, is leading to certainly, right now, actions that are raising lots of eyebrows, rightfully so, around the world. And we're seeing the implications, of course. And the big question is how this, of course, is going to all pan out, right in the United States of America, where they are attempting to engage in a mass deportation of illegal immigrants. But of course, the reality is sinking home, though, that many of these individuals who have come to the United States over the years have in fact integrated, are in fact making contributions, are in fact taking up jobs that many Americans actually don't want to engage in. And the numbers are certainly quite stark. And in the construction sector, for instance, it is believed that up to 14% of all workers in the construction sector in the United States are quote unquote illegal or undocumented immigrants. And that is approaching 1.4 million individuals. In the agriculture sector, nearly 13% of all the workers there are believed to be illegal immigrants. The hospitality sector and hotels and motels and lots of areas that are providing services and conference facilities and what have you. Over 1 million people there are, in fact, undocumented immigrants, or somewhere about 7% of that workforce. So the idea, of course, that we speak about these 11 million individuals, that represents about 3.5% of the US population. So it's a significant, sufficiently large number in truth of individuals who are largely employed or part of the workforce. And overall, the workforce, somewhere about I believe about 8 million or so. Sorry, about 8% of the overall workforce is in fact that of illegal immigrants. So it is a big question mark, especially as you are now finding that many individuals are effectively afraid at this point in time. They have entered the United States looking for perhaps a better life, a better opportunity. Many of them have left countries that are facing significant issues, in particular, especially in Latin America, major issues of violence and gang rivalry and other economic difficulties, whether we're speaking about Venezuela, whether we're speaking about Cuba or Haiti. And many of them end up in the United States of America. And of course, they are making a contribution, but of how that is all going to pan out in terms of their removal is a big question mark. One estimate is that it is going to cost the federal government $88 billion for every 1 million or so of these individuals per year that they can remove. So, United States, of course, is a significant immigrant country. There are about 60 million immigrants living in the United States of America. The vast majority of them are, in fact, lawful immigrants, which have come through many different programs. And that figure, in fact, has been growing over the years. The big question is, are they bringing enough employees or workers into the country to be able to support the growth of the economy? And what this action may very well mean for the U.S. economy is certainly going to be very interesting. Now, of course, over the weekend, flights headed to Guatemala, to Mexico, to Colombia were met with different responses from some of these governments. In the case of Mexico and Colombia, some efforts at pushback and saying that they weren't going to allow those flights to land, but the strong tactics of Mr. Trump to threaten that he would, in fact, impose sanction tariffs, effectively increasing the tariffs for up to 50% on Colombian goods, and threaten to revoke the visas of pretty much everybody connected to the president and his government and party, seem to have caused some fear amongst the individuals making the decisions there and the Petro administration. And invariably, they seem to have agreed and acquiesced to these flights of prisoners being, well, not prisoners, but deportees, almost pretty much being treated like prisoners in chains, being sent to these countries on U.S. military planes. So certainly it's going to be a very interesting play in terms of how that continues to roll out. Now, of course, just today, in our history of the day, the name of James Monroe comes forward, and you may have heard of that Monroe Doctrine. It's one of those ideas that the United States certainly should have the right to an empire effectively within the within the Western Hemisphere, within the Americas. And that has certainly been um, you could say, a pretty important plank of U.S. foreign policy during the 19th century, during that period of significant expansion of the United States. And James Monroe was that individual who, in fact, put forward this idea that Europeans, quote unquote, or European countries should stay away from the Western Hemisphere. Of course, the United States was one of those products of European colonization, and of course, thought, fought for their own independence. And then, of course, the idea that they should, in fact, have effectively the rights of having a sphere of influence across the New World, across the Central and South America, was, in their view, very, very important. And of course, the United States at that time was not as was still expanding, and this was from the period of the 1820s, and which is why within that whole context, as part of this expansion, the idea of, well, what do you do with these individuals, Native Americans, indigenous peoples, who were in fact resident in the lands that they lived on for hundreds or thousands of years, um, east of the Mississippi River. And so he's also tied to this idea of creating of these areas, these reservations, many of whom were sent further out west into land that had not yet been settled. And of course, later on, they eventually did get settled and became states in their own rights as well. But of course, this desire for expansion has certainly been part of a U.S. Empire building for quite some time. And this is exactly why we've seen places like Alaska and Hawaii, and of course, even further afield. Once upon a time, even the Philippines was a territory of the United States of America before it gained its independence. And still in those regions, islands like Guam, very important in terms of the U.S. and how it projects itself into the region of Asia. Now, of course, right here in the Caribbean, that long-standing matter of U.S. intervention and influence within Central America and the Caribbean was very, very well known. Cuba, of course, a very good example of that, as well as Puerto Rico during that Spanish-American War, fighting the Spanish out of these countries during the 1890s, effectively seeing them as opportunities for new territories. Of course, in the case of Puerto Rico, they still are in a bit of a limbo, not a state, but a territory. Yes, they have citizenship, but no, they cannot vote, and no, they do not have voting representation in the United States Congress. Still a long-standing matter, and we'll have to see how that, of course, continues to pan out in that country. So certainly there are a number of U.S. possessions that still remain in Latin America. And of course, maybe the bases also in many of these countries come to mind. Of course, within this current era, we're seeing a new desire again to be able to expand U.S. territory and to perhaps recapture things that were there in the past. The Panama Canal, for example, vital trade link between the West and the East, between the Atlantic and the Pacific, and is certainly a major strategic asset, no doubt, for global trade. And the United States being fearful that the rising influence of China in Panama and along the canal may pose certain threats if and when there, in fact, may be some armed conflict between these two major powers in the world. Of course, the People's Republic of China has expressed interest in not just the Panama Canal and trade with it and through it, but they also too are seeking out new routes to create new links across Central America. One of them involves that of Nicaragua, the Mosquito Coast, the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. Lots of relatively flat plains, and the hope there that they can manage a canal which would then eventually connect to that very significant lake in the center of Nicaragua, Lake Cocibolca, I think it's called, and then eventually to connect it to the Pacific so as to create an alternative route to the Panama Canal is another matter that is being looked at. And of course, there are also other proposals, the possibilities of rail links, in terms of cutting down the trade through the use of rail. And many of these, of course, are perhaps still somewhat of pipe dreams, but certainly the canal is a very vital asset. And so, of course, the United States has been speaking, or rather the Trump administration has been speaking quite a bit about this issue here as well. Of course, in the past, the protection of the canal has had implications for us right here in St. Lucia during World War II. That entire island arc became very much a means of creating an arc of defense for trade passing through the canal. And of course, that is precisely why we saw the creation of two bases right here in St. Lucia during that same period of time as part of the basis for ships agreement signed between the United States and the United Kingdom in the early 1940s during World War II, which saw the creation of the Bean Airfield down in Vieux, as well as the Air Naval Station up in Radway, more so to handle anti-submarine seaplanes in the north as well. So, as to whether in fact we will see a renewed interest in terms of how that pans out in terms of U.S. assets in this part of the world, well, who knows? But certainly lots of interest in that of Greenland at this time. And perhaps coming back to that whole issue of the Monroe Doctrine and whether in fact in North America there should be a Danish, not quite country or autonomous state of sorts, but some may see it as a colony, effectively, of Denmark in North America. And it's now seen as a very strategic asset, both for military purposes in terms of routes, as well as that of oil and gas and other potential mineral extraction. But we're gotten to a point where we actually do need to take a break for our weather report. So we're going to end our dish of the day right now.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A plus. This all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Box, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Lag Street in Castries, Bosses Jugos Village, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Island style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style, whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style, oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island style.
We have tiles and king sets, pieces and ground. Everything you need is on the outside. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. Quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Crompton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And that's what, of course, on the 1.1 is now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style, Tile and Bath. The forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours, winds will be blowing from the east near 23 miles per hour or 37 kilometers per hour with occasional gusts. The weather fair and breezy, becoming cloudy at times with a few showers. And there is an advisory in average breeze that small craft operators and sea beavers are advised to exercise caution due to brisk winds and locally rough seas. The forecast for the Los Angeles is fair to occasionally cloudy and breezy with some scattered showers. And the weather summary, brisk easterly winds and locally rough seas are expected to continue over and around the Eastern Caribbean region during the next few days. Patches of low-level clouds drifting along the wind flow will cause some cloudy periods with showers over portions of the Los Angeles during the forecast period. And this was your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style, Tile and Bath.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island Style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island Style, whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island Style, oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island Style.
We have tiles and king sets, pieces and ground. Everything you need is on the outside. For the best price and the latest style. Take a little drive down to Island Style car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. Quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Crompton Highway, Cass Street, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. So call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Of course, if you want to tell us what's on your plate today, this Monday, you can do just that. And you can call in to 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. One of the actions recently taken by the Trump administration and Mr. Trump was a decision to effectively dismiss, I think, about a dozen inspectors general. And just to give you some sense of what that is, in the United States, Office of Inspector General is a generic term for the Oversight Division of a federal or state agency aimed at preventing inefficient or unlawful operations within their parent agency. Such offices are attached to many federal executive departments, independent federal agencies, as well as state and local governments. Each office includes an inspector general and employees charged with identifying, auditing, and investigating fraud, waste, abuse, embezzlement, and mismanagement of any kind within that executive department. So, in effect, it's somewhat of like the internal audit division within every agency. And there have been calls in the past to consider, providing these types of entities even within our settings. In Jamaica, for example, they created what is known as the Office of Contractor General to provide oversight within the matter of contracts, major contracts, and of course, especially in the area of infrastructure, to ensure that, in fact, everything was above board in terms of the procurement process, in terms of the country receiving value for money, ensuring that there was a fair and due process in terms of even how the projects are conceptualized and designed. And certainly there have been calls for that, something similar right here in the case of St. Lucia as well. We have Office of the Director of Audit, which is a constitutionally provided institution, and it has somewhat of a similar role with a pretty broad remit, however, across the entire government, and in fact, it's supposed to report to the Parliament of St. Lucia, on their findings in terms of their audit reports. So it's a similar kind of idea, and of course, it's not the first time that there have been the attempts of removal of inspectors general over the years by incoming presidents. In fact, it's stated that Ronald Reagan terminated 16 inspectors general when he entered into office in 1981. His administration explained that Reagan intended to hire his own selections, and after Congress objected, Reagan rehired 5 of those terminated. George H.W. Bush also attempted to dismiss all the inspectors general when he became president in 1989, but relented after the inspectors general and Congress objected. Barack Obama dismissed Corporation for National and Community Service Inspector General, Mr. Gerald Walpin, citing a lack of confidence in him. After Congress objected to his lack of explanation, the Obama administration cited that Walpin had shown troubling and inappropriate conduct and pointed to an incident that year when Walpin was disoriented during a board meeting of the corporation, because of which the board requested Walpin's dismissal. Walpin sued for reinstatement, but the courts ruled against him. In 2020, Donald Trump dismissed or replaced 5 inspectors general within 6 weeks. 2 permanent inspectors general were dismissed, and 3 acting inspectors general were replaced. And just after firing Intelligence Inspector General Michael Atkinson, Trump criticized Atkinson as having done a terrible job, and that, quote, he took a fake report and brought it to Congress, in reference to the whistleblower complaint of the Trump-Ukraine scandal, which other testimony and evidence largely verified. Trump also described Atkinson as, quote, not a big Trump fan. Around 1 month before Trump replaced Christy Graham as acting health inspector general, he had called her report of shortages of medical supplies in American hospitals during the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States as, quote, wrong, fake, and her opinion, despite the report being based on a survey of 323 hospitals. And so now, during his second presidency, Mr. Trump has fired over a dozen inspectors general on the evening of January the 24th. And the inspectors general were let go without notice by email, which in fact violates federal law requiring a 30-day notice to Congress about removing the inspector general. The individuals affected came from positions in the Pentagon and Departments of State, Veterans Affairs, and Interior. So, of course, we'll have to see how those matters also pan out and whether, in fact, there would be any challenges in that regard. So, many different moving parts, no doubt. One can appreciate the desire of individuals coming into office wanting to ensure that the government machinery is working efficiently and effectively. But of course, even like with respect to right here in St. Lucia, as in the United States, there are checks regarding such matters and how those things are actually done. And so we'll have to wait to see in that regard what occurs. Now, coming back to the matter of Greenland, we were just speaking about, which of course has raised lots of interest over the past couple of weeks since Mr. Trump has floated the idea again of an American purchase or takeover of Greenland. And he's seen this as effectively, again, and this has been something that we're hearing quite a lot about, in the national security interest. You'd recall, for example, that all aid, foreign aid from the United States has in fact been suspended. And the justification as well is that all aid must now effectively answer the question as to whether it is making America stronger, as to whether it is making America secure, or more secure, or is it making America wealthier or better off economically? And so we're seeing, of course, that aid is no longer going to be merely about perhaps what countries necessarily need, but or whatever maybe the world might actually need, but whether in fact there is some tangible or explicit or maybe even implicit value in terms of the benefit of the United States. Now, of course, in a very general way, one would think that the whole idea of providing aid to other countries is, well, for one, because you are recognizing that there's a general humanity and that it is important, in fact, to be able to achieve global stability, and of course that means that everybody needs to be able to have some sort of a basic standard of living. And so, of course, lots of aid has been about that, and the whole idea of the Sustainable Development Goals has tried to put some of this into context. But it does not seem to be so straightforward. And it certainly is speaking to how many of these things are coming down to what is a rather transactional approach. What is it for me, and how we can benefit directly. It's interesting because it is also being utilized in respect of even internal aid from the federal government going to support efforts like the damage in California as a result of these forest fires, which devastated many neighborhoods in and around Los Angeles. And again, it appears that they will be on condition. They will be conditional to certain requirements of Mr. Trump and his administration. Of course, the matter of Greenland, as I mentioned, is one of those areas where, again, Mr. Trump believes that he can simply purchase or make a nice offer to the 50, 60,000 or so inhabitants of Greenland, who, although they are part of the Kingdom of Denmark, they in fact are largely they're not ethnic Danish, but largely Inuit. So they are in fact indigenous to the majority of the population is in fact indigenous to Greenland and that northern region, just like in Canada as well, Nunavut, Northwest Territories, those areas, they effectively are ethnically the same. And so the idea that, of course, that he can get Greenland is in that same vein. Well, let's purchase. We've purchased Alaska before. Why shouldn't we be able to purchase Greenland? And there's an interesting story from the BBC, which tackles this on the matter. Trump wants to take Greenland. 4 ways this saga could go. And it's from the 11th of January. In recent weeks, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has shown renewed interest in taking control of Greenland, a largely autonomous territory of Denmark in the Arctic and the world's largest island. He first indicated an intention to buy Greenland in 2019 during his first term as president, but this week he went further, refusing to rule out economic or military force to take control of it. Danish and European officials have responded negatively, saying Greenland is not for sale and its territorial integrity must be preserved. So how could this unusual situation play out with two NATO allies at odds over a huge territory which is 80% covered with ice, but has considerable untapped mineral wealth? And how could the aspirations for independence among Greenland's population of 56,000 under Danish control for 300 years affect the final outcome? Here we look at 4 possible scenarios for Greenland's future. 1. Trump loses interest, nothing happens. There is some speculation that Trump's move is just bluster, a move to get Denmark to boost Greenland's security in the face of the threat of both Russia and China seeking influence in the region. Last month, Denmark announced a new $1.5 billion military package for the Arctic. It had been prepared before Trump's remarks, but the announcement just hours after them was described by the Danish defense minister as an irony of fate. Quote, "What is important in what Trump said was that Denmark has to fulfill its obligations in the Arctic, or it's got to let the US do it," says Elizabeth Svane, chief political correspondent for Politiken newspaper. Mark Jacobsen, associate professor at the Royal Danish Defense College, believes that this is a case of Trump, quote, "positioning himself before entering office, while Greenland is using the occasion to gain more international authority as an important step towards independence." So even if Trump were to lose interest in Greenland now, which Professor Jacobsen thinks is the most likely scenario, he has certainly put the spotlight on the issue. But independence for Greenland has been on the agenda for many years, and some say the debate could even go in the opposite direction. Quote, "I noticed in the last few days the Greenland PM is calmer in his comments, i.e., yes, we want independence, but in the long run," says Svan. 2. Greenland votes for independence, seeks closer ties with the US. There is a general consensus in Greenland that independence will happen eventually, and also that if Greenland votes for it, Denmark will accept and ratify it. However, it is also unlikely that Greenland would vote for independence unless its people are given guarantees that they can keep the subsidies they currently get from Denmark to pay for things like healthcare and the welfare system. Quote, the Greenland PM may be up in arms now, but in the event that he actually calls a referendum, he will need some kind of convincing narrative about how to save the Greenland economy and welfare system. Ulrich Gad, a senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies, told the BBC. One possible next step is a free association, something like the US currently has with the Pacific states, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Palau. Denmark has previously opposed this status, but both for Greenland and the Faroe Islands. But according to Dr. Gad, current Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is not categorically against it. Danish understanding of the Greenland historical experience is way better than it was 20 years ago, he says, with Denmark accepting colonial responsibility. The recent discussions might persuade Frederiksen to say better to keep Denmark in the Arctic, keep some kind of connection to Greenland, even if it's a looser one, he adds. But even if Greenland is able to get rid of Denmark, it has become clear in recent years that it can't get rid of the US. The Americans never really left after taking control of the island in World War II and see it as vital for their security. An agreement in 1951 affirmed Denmark's basic sovereignty of the island, but in effect gave the US whatever it wanted. Dr. Gad said the Greenland officials had been in contact with the last two US administrations about Washington's role. They now know the US will never leave, he said. 3. Trump steps up economic pressure. There has been speculation that Trump's economic rhetoric is potentially the biggest threat to Denmark, with the US drastically increasing tariffs on Danish or even EU goods, forcing Denmark into concessions of some kind over Greenland. Professor Jacobsen says Danish governments have been preparing for that, and not just because of the Arctic territory. Trump has been threatening universal 10% tariffs on all US imports, which could, among other things, significantly disrupt European growth, and some Danish and other European companies are now considering setting up manufacturing bases in the US. Possible options for raising tariffs include by invoking the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Benjamin Coate of international law firm Pillsbury told the website MarketWatch. One of the main Danish industries potentially affected by this is pharmaceuticals. The US receives products such as hearing aids and most of its insulin from Denmark, as well as the diabetes drug Ozempic, made by the Danish company Novo Nordisk. Analysts say the hike in prices that would result from these measures would not find favor with the US public. 4. Trump invades Greenland. The nuclear option, quote unquote, seems far-fetched, but with Trump failing to rule out military action, it has to be considered. Essentially, it wouldn't be hard for the US to take control, given that they already have bases and plenty of troops in Greenland. Quote, the US has de facto control already, says Professor Jacobsen, adding that Trump's remarks seemed ill-informed and he didn't understand the point of them. That said, any use of military force by Washington would create an international incident. Quote, if they invade Greenland, they invade NATO, says Svan. So that's where it stops. Article 5 would have to be triggered, and if a NATO country invades NATO, then there's no NATO. Dr. Gad said Trump sounds like Chinese President Xi Jinping talking about Taiwan, or Russia's Vladimir Putin talking about Ukraine. Quote, he's saying it's legitimate for us to take this piece of land, he says. If we take him really seriously, this is a bad omen for the whole of the Western Alliance. And that story coming from the BBC, entitled Trump Wants to Take Greenland, 4 Ways This Saga Could Go. And of course, the last point there is certainly very important because it is certainly, especially if it goes to that extent, certainly other world leaders will feel emboldened that their efforts at expansion of territory are also perfectly justified. And whether it's Ukraine for the Russians, or whether it's Taiwan for the People's Republic of China, they can then point to Greenland for the United States. That's our program for today. And of course, we do hope that you can join us again tomorrow for another one. God willing, I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.